Imagine you are the first forensic investigator to enter a house where a serious crime has just occurred. There is a broken window, a chair has been overturned, there are bloodstains on the floor, a mobile phone is lying beside the victim, and there are several people standing around the scene. And here is the important question. What should the investigator do first? Should they immediately start collecting fingerprints? Should they pick up the mobile phone? Should they move the furniture to understand what happened, or should they photograph everything first? The correct approach is that before collecting evidence, the crime scene must be understood, secured, documented, and preserved, because a crime scene is not simply a place where a crime happened. It is a source of physical evidence that can help reconstruct the events of the crime and establish associations between the victim, suspect, objects, and the location. And there is one principle that lies at the heart of crime scene investigation, that is famous Locard's exchange principle. Every contact leaves a trace. When two objects or persons come into contact, there is often an exchange of material. A person entering a crime scene may leave fingerprint, fibers, hair, footwear, impressions, or biological material. At the same time, that person may carry material away from the scene. So, the crime scene can tell a story, but there is a problem. That story can be destroyed very easily. A footprint can be stepped on, a fingerprint can be wiped away, a bloodstain can be disturbed, an object can be moved. And once the original condition of the scene is altered, reconstructing what actually happened becomes much more difficult. So in today's video, we are going to understand four major areas: the nature of a crime scene, the types of crime scenes, preservation of the crime scene, and the initial crime scene consideration. And by the end of this video, you should be able to distinguish between different types of crime scenes and understand exactly what an investigator should consider when approaching the scene. So let's begin. A crime scene is a location or area associated with the occurrence of a crime and from which physical evidence may be obtained. Now notice something important here. A crime scene does not necessarily mean only the exact location where the crime physically occurred. Suppose a person is assaulted inside a house. The assault occurs in the bedroom, but the suspect leaves through the front door. A blood-stained object is thrown into a nearby drain, and the suspect's vehicle is parked several streets away. Where is the crime scene? Potentially, all these locations may become relevant crime scenes. The bedroom may be considered the primary crime scene, while the doorway, vehicle, and drain may constitute secondary scenes or associated location. Therefore, investigators must think beyond the obvious location. The nature of a crime scene refers to the characteristics and circumstances that determine how the scene should be examined, documented, preserved, and investigated. A crime scene can differ dramatically from another crime scene. A burglary scene is not examined in exactly the same way as a homicide scene. A road traffic accident is different from a fire scene. A sexual assault scene may involve biological evidence, while a cybercrime may have a little or no obvious traditional physical evidence at the location. Therefore, the investigator must first understand what kind of scene they are dealing with. A crime scene may contain different types of evidences. A single scene may contain biological evidence, fingerprints, footwear impressions, tool marks, fibers, hair, glass, fragments, soil, documents, weapons, and DNA evidence. For example, imagine a burglary again. The investigator notices a broken window. At first glance, the broken glass may appear to be the most important evidence, but at the closer examination, a fingerprint on the window frame is revealed, a footwear impression near the window, a fiber caught on a broken edge, a small amount of blood from the offender, and perhaps CCTV footage from a nearby camera are also revealed. Therefore, investigators must avoid focusing on only one obvious piece of evidence. A crime scene can also be dynamic. A dynamic crime scene is one in which conditions may change rapidly. Weather can alter evidence, people can disturb the scene, fire can destroy materials, water can wash away biological evidence, vehicles can move, crowds can enter, and animals can disturb objects. Therefore, some scenes require immediate protective measure. Consider a crime scene outdoors during heavy rain. Suppose investigators have discovered a footwear impression in soft soil. If they wait too long, rainfall may completely destroy the impression. Therefore, priority may be to protect and document that evidence before it disappears. This teaches us an important lesson. Crime scene investigation is not just about finding evidence, it is also about preventing evidence from being lost. A crime scene can also be very fragile. Some evidences are extremely fragile, such as dust impressions, footwear impressions, fingerprints, hair, fibers, biological fluids, and bloodstain patterns. A simple mistake can destroy such evidence. For example, an investigator walks across a floor containing a faint footwear impression. That single step may destroy potentially valuable evidence. This is why investigators must establish a controlled pathway for entering and exiting the scene. Another important characteristic of a crime scene is the possibility of contamination. Contamination occurs when foreign material is introduced into the crime scene or existing evidence is altered. Suppose investigators are collecting DNA evidence. If an investigator touches the evidence without appropriate precautions, biological material from the investigator may potentially be introduced. Similarly, touching several objects with the same gloves can transfer material from one object to another. This is why appropriate personal protective equipment and personal evidence handling procedures are essential. The scene may also contain both relevant and irrelevant material. Not everything present at a crime scene is necessarily related to the crime. Imagine a house where a homicide has occurred. There may be furniture, clothing, food, newspapers, children's toys, and electronic devices. Some of these objects may have no connection to the crime at all. The investigator must therefore distinguish between ordinary background material and potentially significant evidence. But remember that an object that appears insignificant initially may become important later. For example, a glass that appears to be an ordinary drinking glass could potentially contain fingerprints or DNA. Therefore, investigators should avoid making premature assumptions. The crime scene can also provide information for reconstruction. Crime scene evidence is not collected merely to identify a person. It can also help investigators understand what happened. For example, a bloodstain pattern may provide information about movement or impact. A broken lock may suggest forced entry. A displaced object may provide information about the sequence of events. Footwear impressions may indicate movement through the scene. The arrangement of objects may help investigators reconstruct events. Therefore, crime scene examination is both evidence collection and event reconstruction. Now comes one of the interesting sections for UGC NET. Crime scenes can be classified in several ways. Do not memorize just one classification because different forensic texts may classify scenes using different criteria. Let's understand the major classification conceptually. A primary crime scene is a location where the main criminal activity or incident is believed to have occurred. For example, suppose a person is assaulted inside a bedroom. The bedroom is a location where the assault occurred and therefore it may be considered as the primary crime scene. A secondary crime scene is a location associated with the crime but not necessarily the location where the principal criminal act occurred. Imagine a homicide. The victim is killed inside a house but the body is later transported and abandoned in a field. The house may be primary crime scene. The field where the body is found may be a secondary crime scene. The vehicle used to transport the body could also provide another associated scene. This is why investigators must ask not only where did the crime occur, but also where else might evidence connected to the crime be found. An indoor crime scene occurs within an enclosed structure such as a house, apartment, office, shop, hotel room, or a warehouse. Indoor scenes generally provide some environmental protection from weather. However, they can still be heavily contaminated by people moving through the area. Consider a burglary in an apartment. The investigator may examine doors, windows, locks, drawers, cabinets, floors, furniture, and electronic devices. The investigator should document the scene before disturbing objects. An outdoor crime scene occurs in an open environment such as a road, field, forest, parking area, riverbank, empty plot, or public space. Outdoor scenes can be particularly challenging because evidence is exposed to environmental factors. These include rain, wind, sunlight, temperature, animals, insects, and human activity. Suppose investigators find footwear impressions in wet soil. Rain may destroy them, people may walk over them, and animals may disturb them. Therefore, outdoor scenes often require rapid protection and documentation. A vehicle can itself become a crime scene. This type of crime scene is often called as mobile crime scenes in many of the forensic science textbooks. It can also be called as a vehicle crime scene. For example, a car, bus, truck, taxi, motorcycle, or boat may contain evidence associated with the crime. Suppose a vehicle is suspected to have been used in a kidnapping. Investigators may examine the steering wheel, door handles, seats, floor, trunk, seat belts, glass, biological stains, fibers, hair, fingerprints, and digital system. The vehicle may contain evidence connecting individuals to the incident. Vehicles and other forms of transport can also serve as location where a crime occurred or where evidence was transferred. For example, a train compartment may become a crime scene following an assault. An investigator may need to examine not only the immediate location but also connected areas such as entrances, exits, and surrounding compartments. Another classification involves micro and macro crime scenes. A macro crime scene refers to the broader scene or larger area associated with an incident. For example, a large building, an entire house, or an extensive outdoor area may be considered a macro scene. Within that larger scene, investigators may identify smaller areas of interest. A microcrime scene refers to a smaller area or individual item that may contain significant evidence. For example, a particular piece of clothing, a broken window, a small bloodstain, a weapon, or a fingerprint bearing surface may be considered in the context of a micro scene. So think of this way. Macro means the bigger scene, while micro refers to a smaller evidence focused area. Some scenes are extremely complicated because of several locations, individuals, or events are involved. These may be considered complex crime scenes. For example, a kidnapping may involve the location where the victim was abducted, the suspect's vehicle, a location where the victim was held, and a location where evidence was discarded. This creates a network of associated scenes. Such cases require careful coordination and documentation. Now, let's come to one of the most important concepts, that is crime scene preservation. Imagine you arrive at a crime scene. There is a footprint near the door. Before you photograph it, someone walks over it. The impression is completely destroyed. Can you recover the original evidence? Usually no. This is why the first priority is to preserve the scene in its original condition as far as reasonably possible. The principle here is simple. Do not change what you are trying to examine. Crime scene preservation means protecting the scene and its evidence from unnecessary disturbance. contamination, loss, or alteration. The objective is to ensure that investigators can examine the scene as close as possible to its original condition. When investigators first arrive at a crime scene, they should not immediately rush into evidence collection. There is a logical sequence, and understanding this sequence is extremely important. The first consideration is personal safety. Before entering the scene, investigators should consider possible hazards. These may include weapons, fire, electricity, chemicals, toxic gases, structural instability, aggressive persons, and biological hazards. Suppose investigators arrive at an industrial building after a suspected chemical incident. The investigators should not simply enter and start collecting evidence. First, the question must be, is the scene safe to enter? Safety comes before evidence collection. The second consideration is whether medical assistance is required. If injured or potentially living victims are present, medical care takes priority. The purpose of crime scene investigation is not to delay emergency treatment. Suppose a victim is found alive, the first responsibility is to ensure appropriate emergency assistance. However, investigators should remain conscious of potential evidence. For example, if possible, they should note the victim's original position and condition before the victim is moved. Once immediate safety and medical needs are addressed, the scene must be secured. The scene must be protected from unauthorized access. People who do not need to be present should remain outside the controlled area. Why? Because every additional person entering the crime scene increases the possibility of contamination, evidence destruction, transfer of materials, and unnecessary disturbance. Think of the crime scene as a controlled environment. The fewer unnecessary people entering, the better. The next step is control entry and exit. Investigators should know who enters, who leaves when they enter, and why they enter. Where appropriate, their movement through the scene should be documented. A scene entry log can be extremely useful. For example, an investigating officer may enter at 9:10 a.m. for scene assessment. Medical personnel may enter at 9:15 a.m. for medical assistance. The photographer may enter at 9:30 a.m. for documentation, and a forensic examiner may enter at 9:40 a.m. for evidence examination. The purpose here is accountability and contamination control. Investigators must also protect fragile evidence. Some evidence requires immediate protection, including footwear impressions, tire impressions, bloodstains, biological material, trace evidence, and weather-sensitive evidence. Suppose there is a muddy shoe impression outside a house. The investigators should not casually walk around it. The area may need to be protected while the impression is documented and appropriately examined. After this, investigators make initial observations. Before touching or moving anything, investigators should observe the scene. They should consider the general condition of the scene, doors and windows, objects that appear disturbed, possible points of entry and exit, visible injuries, weapons, bloodstains, signs of struggle, and environmental conditions. The initial observation helps investigators develop a preliminary understanding of the scene. The scene must then be documented. Documentation is one of the foundations of crime scene investigation. Photographs can record the condition of the scene before the objects are moved. Generally, documentation may include overall photographs, mid-range photographs, and close-up photographs. Overall photographs show the entire scene. Mid-range photographs show the relationship between an item of evidence and its surroundings. Close-up photographs show the specific evidence in detail. For example, a photograph of the entire bedroom is an overall view. A photograph showing a knife on the floor in relation to the bed is a mid-range wave. A close-up photograph showing the knife and a possible bloodstain is a close-up wave. The important idea is that photographers should help preserve the original condition and relationship within the scene. Crime scene sketches or diagrams may also be prepared. A sketch can show spatial relationships that photographs may not communicate as clearly. A sketch may include measurements, the location of objects, evidence position, doors, windows, furniture, body position, directions, and distances. The important point is that scenes should be documented before significant alteration occurs. Written notes provide another layer of documentation. Notes may include the date, time, location, weather, lighting conditions, scene condition, persons present, observations, evidence identified, and actions taken. And why are these important? Because photographs do not record everything. For example, a photograph may show a window, but written notes may record that the window was open, the glass was broken, and the room was unusually very cold. Once the scene is documented and prepared for examination, investigators conduct a systematic search. The search pattern may depend on the type and size of the scene. One common method is the strip or line search, in which investigators move in parallel line across an area. This can be useful for relatively large outdoor areas. Another method is the grid search, where the area is searched in one direction and then at approximately right angles, providing a more thorough search. A spiral search involves the investigator moving in a spiral pattern and may be useful in certain open or relatively uncluttered scenes. And the method is the zone or quadrant search, in which the scene is divided into smaller sections and each section is searched systematically. This can be particularly useful for large or complex scenes. There is also the wheel or ray search, in which the search proceeds outward or inward along radial lines. The important UGC NET point is that there is no single search pattern suitable for every crime scene. The investigator chooses a method according to the scene's characteristics. Let's understand contamination in a practical way. Just imagine a crime scene contains a bloodstain. Investigator A collects it using one pair of gloves. Then, without changing gloves, the investigator touches another item. What could happen? Material may potentially be transferred between two locations. Therefore, proper glove use and changing gloves when appropriate are important contamination control measures. Similarly, appropriate protective clothing can help prevent the introduction of foreign materials. Biological evidence can be particularly sensitive. Examples include blood, saliva, semen, tissue, and hair with biological material. The general principles include avoiding unnecessary handling, preventing contamination, packaging evidence appropriately, allowing suitable biological evidence to dry when required before packaging, and using appropriate packaging and labeling while maintaining proper chain of custody. The exact handling method depends on the type and condition of the evidence. Trace evidence includes small materials such as fibers, hair, glass, paint, soil, and particles. These materials can be extremely easy to lose. Imagine a suspect's clothing contains a few fibers transferred from a victim's carpet. If the clothing is shaken unnecessarily, those fibers may be lost. Therefore, trace evidence must be handled carefully to minimize loss or transfer. Modern crime scenes can contain digital evidence. Examples include mobile phones, computer, tablets, cameras, storage devices, smartwatches, and other electronic devices. Digital evidence requires special consideration because inappropriate handling can alter or destroy information. For example, turning a device on or off, unlocking it, connecting it to another device, or changing its state may potentially affect digital evidence. Therefore, digital evidence should be handled according to appropriate forensic. Now let's connect crime scene preservation with another important forensic concept, that is chain of custody. Chain of custody is the documented chronological record of the handling of evidence. It helps establish who collected it, when it was collected, where it was collected, who received it, where it was stored, and who transferred it. Why is this important? Because evidence is valuable only when its integrity can be demonstrated. Imagine investigators recover a knife, but there is no clear record of who handled it after collection. Questions can arise about whether the item was altered, contaminated, substituted, or improperly stored. Proper documentation reduces these concerns. Let's put everything together with a fictional example. Imagine police arrive at a house at 8:30 p.m. A person has been found unconscious in the living room. There is a broken window. A chair is overturned. There is a bloodstain near the doorway. A mobile phone is lying on the floor, and muddy footwear impressions are visible outside the window. What should investigators do? Let's walk through it. First comes the safety assessment. Is there any immediate threat? Is the suspect still present? Are they dangerous objects or environmental hazards? Second comes medical assistance. The injured person must receive appropriate medical attention. Third, the scene is secured. Unauthorized persons should be prevented from entering. Fourth, entry and exit are controlled. A record should be maintained of authorized personnel. Fifth comes initial observation. Investigators note the condition of the room without unnecessarily touching objects. Sixth, the scene is photographed. Overall views are taken first, followed by photographs showing relationships between evidence and surroundings, and then close-up photographs. 7. The footwear impressions are documented and protected because rain or further movement could destroy them. 8. The broken window is examined. Possible fingerprints, glass fragments, fibers, or biological material may be present. 9th, the bloodstain is examined. Its location, pattern, and characteristics may provide useful information. 10th, the mobile phone is examined appropriately because it may contain digital evidence. Notice what we did not do. We did not immediately pick up the phone. We did not walk over the footwear impression. We did not move the chair. We did not start touching every object. We first protected, observed, and documented the scene. That is the essence of good crime scene investigation. Now, let's look at some mistakes investigators must avoid. One mistake is entering without considering contamination. Unnecessary entry can introduce foreign material. Another mistake is moving objects before documentation. Once an object is moved, its original position may be difficult to establish. Another mistake is failing to control access. Too many people can compromise the scene. Investigators must also avoid ignoring fragile evidence. Footwear impressions, trace evidence, and biological material may disappear quickly. Another common problem is focusing only on obvious evidence. The most obvious item may not be the most important item. Finally, poor documentation and cross-contamination can create serious problems because improper handling can transfer material between evidence items. Let's now compress everything into an easy sequence. When arriving at a crime scene, think safety, medical assistant, secure the scene, control access, observe, document, protect evidence, search systematically, collect and preserve evidence, and maintain chain of custody. You can remember the overall flow as safe, secure, observe, document, search, collect, and preserve. This sequence is extremely useful for examination revision. Let's quickly distinguish some concepts that can be confusing. A primary scene is the main location where the crime is believed to have occurred, whereas a secondary scene is another location associated with the crime. An indoor scene is an enclosed environment, whereas an outdoor scene is an open environment that is often more exposed to weather and other environmental conditions. A macro scene refers to the larger overall scene, whereas a micro scene refers to a smaller evidence-focused area or item. Finally, preservation and collection are not the same thing. Preservation means protecting evidence and the scene from the loss, alteration, or contamination. Collection means recovering evidence from the scene for examination. These concepts are related, but they are not same. Let's see whether you can answer these before I reveal the answer. An investigator arrives at a crime scene and immediately begins collecting evidence without documenting the original condition. What major principle has been compromised? Is it scene preservation, evidence reconstruction, initial documentation, or all of the above? Think about it. The best answer for this is all of the above, because failure to document the original condition can compromise preservation and later reconstruction. A body is found in an abandoned field, but the investigators believe the victim was killed inside a house and transported to the field. Which location could represent the crime scene? Is it the field, the house, the police station, or the laboratory? The correct answer is the house. If evidence establishes that the principal criminal act occurred there, the field may represent a secondary scene. Which is particularly vulnerable at an outdoor crime scene? Is it environmental alteration of evidence, contamination, weather-related damage, or all of the above? The correct answer is all of the above. Which activity should generally occur before extensive evidence collection? Is it scene documentation, evidence disposal, moving furniture, or cleaning the scene? The correct answer is scene documentation. So what should you remember from today's topic? A crime scene is much more than a location. It is an environment containing potential information about what happened, where it happened, how it happened, who may have been involved, and sometimes when events occurred. But the value of that information depends heavily on how carefully the scene is handled. The fundamental principles are simple but extremely important. Secure the scene, protect the evidence, prevent contamination, document the original condition, search systematically, collect appropriately, and maintain the chain of custody. And most importantly, remember this statement: do not destroy the evidence while trying to find the evidence. That single idea captures the importance of crime scene preservation. For your UGC NET preparation, remember these key points. A crime scene is a location associated with the crime from which relevant evidence may be obtained. A primary scene is the main location of the criminal activity. A secondary scene is an associated location other than the principal scene. An indoor scene is an enclosed environment, while an outdoor scene is an open environment, often exposed to environmental factors. A macro scene represents the broader area, while a micro scene represents a smaller evidence-focused area. Crime scene preservation means protecting the scene and evidence from alteration, loss, and contamination. Documentation may involve photography, notes, sketches, and other appropriate recording methods. Searching should be systematic and selected according to the characteristics of the scene, and chain of custody refers to the chronological documentation of evidence handling. And remember, a crime scene can tell a story, but only if investigators preserve the evidence that tells that story. If you found this explanation useful, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because we are covering the UGC NET Forensic Science syllabus topic by topic in a simple exam-focused way. And don't just watch this video passively. Pause the video and ask yourself, if I were the first investigator at this scene, what would I do first? That kind of active recall will help you remember concepts much better for UGC NET examination. If you found this video useful, share it with your fellow UGC NET aspirants, And in the comments, tell me which crime scene concept do you find the most confusing? Primary versus secondary scene, search patterns, preservation, or chain of custody? I'll see you in the next forensic science video. Keep learning, keep revising, and keep solving.